So after our last conversation, and all the fun past experience working together, I thought we'd talk about sales and marketing, not sales versus marketing, since a lot of people think it's one or the other. And after all of our work together over the years, when we were with Spin and then Gunderson and other laundries, we've done a lot of work together, but we stay in touch. And I'm a big follower of Sales Bag LinkedIn articles.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about your background, your experience, and where all this sales genius comes from.
Is being used quite liberally there, but I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, no, I mean, I started writing and producing content mostly so I could come up with some sort of a coherent philosophy that I could really teach to, right? And that at least, I could kind of cultivate my own philosophy. And so that's really where the content that I produce sort of started. And, in doing that, I think that I've come to the conclusion that sales and marketing are really one entity, especially for small businesses and medium-sized ones. So a lot of the talks that you and I have, Rebecca, are really based around, that theory and being one cohesive functioning unit to bring growth and new revenue into organizations. And I think that's something that you and I have worked together on very successfully over the years.
Absolutely. So, talk a little bit more about seeing marketing more as that investment, right? That sales and marketing really should be connected and marketing accountable to sales and vice versa.
Sure. It's one of those things where there's not really one way to grow an organization, right? You can throw a lot of resources at it, and some companies have the ability to do that and others don't. So it's really about strategic placement of your resources. And I think that's one of the things that I've really become an acolyte for marketing from that standpoint. I think it's a way to get a lot of work done for sales organizations without putting a lot of human capital or equipment or machines into place. When you think about it, anytime a small business makes a capital purchase of a machine, that's usually at minimum a $500,000 investment, upwards of $1 million plus. It's the same thing with sales reps. They're not cheap, especially good ones. So anytime you put another body out on the street, you're probably looking at a minimum $100,000 investment all in. So when you really start to pencil out where marketing can come in, you can drive a lot of the same growth more strategically, smarter, and I would argue for less money. When I think about the function of sales and marketing, really marketing kind of sets a table for sales to make their life easier. So it behooves the sales department as well to really have a competent marketing partner and to take it very seriously and give marketing what they need to make sales easier. And I think that's what we're all trying to do here is drive growth efficiently. So sales wants easier sales, companies want growth, and marketing is really there to support all of that. And they kind of are the catalyst for a lot of that. That's the way I see it.
So in companies where you've worked and others that you work with, do you see it being siloed almost by leadership or
Sure, I'm sure you've experienced this too, right? I mean, sometimes the wrong marketing strategy can lead to some pretty bad outcomes, and I think that's why sometimes people are jaded with the marketing experience, both as business owners or CEOs, down to the sales. And there doesn't always, I think we've all seen organizations where that trust isn't there. I'm sure you've seen that. I'm sure you've come into situations like that where you get brought on as a marketing partner, and maybe there's a lot of doubt and skepticism, and it's right or wrong. It's probably not even fair to marketing, but yeah, I think organizations are siloed, and I think and unfortunately, I think marketing actually probably gets the brunt of that anger around it, right or wrong. I mean, I see marketing sort of being a scapegoat a lot. Do you experience that?
Yes, I do. And you mentioned where there's lots of hesitancy or lack of trust with marketing agencies because they've been burned before. Some that we've worked with, marketing, they talk about their agency not understanding their market or promoting products they don't offer, and then ask how often do they meet with that agency partner, and they said rarely. So that's where we look at we want a seat at that sales table to know what salespeople are, what they're talking to people about, what are they hearing, and what do they need to be successful so all their marketing content speaks the same language, because our goal, it's not a marketing agency versus the client. We want to be that connection and be their advocate and make sure that any content created is relevant and going to get them the leads that they need.
Yeah. So what are some strategies that you see from the marketing side to sort of build that trust? I think we both established that maybe the onus falls more on the marketing side of that, right or wrong. So what do you do initially to overcome some of that baggage and build that trust?
Yeah, sometimes we feel like marketing counselors, but really, we're pretty transparent when someone's investing in marketing, just like they're investing in a salesperson. they're taking a chance. And I don't know many companies that have, thousands of dollars to use for a chance or a bet. So we, even when we're having initial conversations, we dig into what we can, looking at, analytics and opportunities. And we want to talk to, leadership, sales managers, and what's happening in their business and in their market. But what we do is we have a dedicated account manager for each of our clients. So they have one point of contact who gets to know their business really well and pretty intimately. So that client knows they just need to call, one person, Elizabeth, for example, for anything they need, but they're backed up by a team of experts when it comes to, SEO, web development, social media strategy. We're getting into more CRM utilization and automations as well. And we continue to educate and inform. So there's no veil or, no divider between us and the client, but meeting every month, sometimes every 2 weeks, to look at what's happening, what we see in the data, and then what they're hearing in the field. And that really helps, because being a true partner, if we need to adjust something on the fly or a new opportunity comes up, we want to activate some marketing activities to help them capitalize on an opportunity.
That makes sense. And one of the things that I appreciate about, certainly our partnership over the years and with good marketing experiences that I've had, I think it comes down to two things that differentiate, just another marketing company versus a really good partner. And I think it's accountability and the cadence. So getting into that routine, that's the cadence. So those every 2 week calls, every month calls that you mentioned, that's so critical to keep everybody steering the ship the right direction and making sure every project is, being crossed off the list. And then the accountability comes in with the meeting deadlines and the outcome-based results. A lot of marketing companies have the creative dialed in. I feel like you can get some really cool stuff from a lot of places, right? But if it's not deployed effectively, then it doesn't have a lot of impact for sales. That's been my experience. So I think, I would encourage anybody that's watching this to, when you're evaluating marketing, to really focus on the result part of it and how their workflow is structured and making sure that that's systematic. Because you can have all the creative in the world, but if those two pieces aren't in place, you're not going to see the results, as well as somebody who's maybe not even as good at the creative, but has those systems dialed in. I think that's true in my experience. And, that's what your team, I think, really, that's your differentiator, in my opinion.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Yeah, creative, I mean, that's important, but that brand knowledge and the consistency. Marketing is not a single campaign. It is continuous with multi-layers in that funnel, right? From brand awareness, being there when people are looking or have a pain, and then even retention. So all the content that you're putting out there, and sometimes recruitment. There
Yeah.
was
Yeah, there's a lot
yeah.
marketing can do. That's the other thing. It's not just about attracting new customers. You can penetrate your existing customer base with new products. If you are deploying new products overall, new SKUs to your arsenal, new items. I mean, marketing can be a critical way of judging success or failure in those. And then, yeah, I mean, to your point, I'm sure you guys are, everybody's struggling for talent, right? And attracting people. So I imagine you've only seen that segment of what customers are asking for increase over the years, I would assume, correct?
Yes, yep. I mean, especially, going back to, COVID days in the B2B space, lots of manufacturing and process. So looking for talent and employees there was a big challenge. Speaking of COVID, and then one article you wrote a while ago about your car buying experience. What do you think how would you describe the sales process as changing? Whether, it's the consumer or B2B perspective. Tell me
Yeah,
about that experience.
sure. Yeah, the article I wrote a couple of years ago was just about my car buying experience and, how I was sort of using maybe modern buying techniques, not even like deliberately, but subconsciously. I was doing a ton of online research. I, was sort of trying to figure out various dealers' reputations and all that. I was doing all that on my own so I essentially, by the time I had even contacted a car dealership to make a purchase, right, I had already more or less locked in on the model of car I wanted, the options I wanted on it, and I had even done a little due diligence and crossed some dealerships off the list just based on their Google reviews or their online presence. If their website looked kind of bad, or I wasn't, cars are commodities like a lot of things that we sell, and the differentiators to me were basically in the online presence and the marketing to some degree. And then once I reached out to dealerships, I had the experiences that were mostly bad when people were trying to put me into, using a lot of shady tactics and, you know, not necessarily listening to my needs, which were at this point I had sort of made my decision, right? So I found myself attracted as a buyer to salespeople and companies that were meeting me at my level because I had already sort of self-selected what I was looking for. I just needed somebody to give me the answers I needed. I think the takeaway from that, and I think it continues to evolve, and it probably always will with technology, that buyers are just a lot more educated now, and they're not engaging as early in the sales process as they were, even 5 years ago, but certainly 10, 15 when I started getting in this business. The internet, it wasn't new, but it wasn't necessarily used as a business tool as much. Google reviews weren't really a thing. There was no social media. So it was really hard to gauge somebody's online reputation to the degree that it is now, right? So it wasn't as easy to shop for yourself. And now it is a lot easier. There's a lot of information out there, and people can really be choosy about who they're doing business with. And by the time buyers are reaching out to engage with salespeople, they more or less think they have it figured out. And in my experience, sometimes they don't, but a lot of times they really do. A lot of times they're adept at coming up with a solution on their own, and then they're just looking for somebody to hold their hand and guide them through it. And that's where the value of the sales rep comes in. So the front of the pipeline, in my opinion, getting opportunities into the funnel has really fallen more on the shoulders of marketing than it used to be. And salespeople are truly more evolving into consultative closers, really handling more of not even, it's almost like discovery is kind of the middle part, right? A lot of times we're not doing as thorough of a discovery call because a customer has sort of assessed their own needs. So we're just kind of backfilling with solutions. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying this is what's kind of occurring now. And so marketing really plays a more pivotal role, I'd argue, today in bringing customers into the pipeline. And when we talk about top of mind awareness and meeting people when they're ready to buy and being the company that they reach out to, that's where marketing plays a huge role. So I've seen a shift from marketing just sort of being kind of an advertising to really just creating that top of mind awareness. And that's what I'm looking for now, because our sales team will take it from when people are ready to buy.
Yeah, marketing's job is delivering those marketing qualified leads. And again, going back to COVID, it made all of us our own salespeople. And people are, yeah, they're much more educated. Like you said, they value their time, resisting traditional appointments, right? I'm sure you
Oh
see
yeah.
that, your sales team sees that. Shoot,
Yeah.
I see that. It's funny. People who are, 20 minutes from our office would rather do a virtual meeting than
Yeah.
meet in person.
And you can either embrace that and figure out workarounds, or you can continue to push the same old metrics. And I don't think there's one way to do it, but I think there is something to be said for efficiency. I think the smart organizations are potentially able to run a little leaner with maybe less salespeople than you'd have in a traditional territory geographic situation. Go set your 10 first appointments a week, make 20 cold calls a day. That can still work. I'm not saying it can't, but I don't think it's the most efficient. And I don't think that you can run with as small of a payroll as a business owner doing it that way. That doesn't mean you won't get results, but I don't think that it's necessarily going to be the best use of resources. I would rather see the shift putting more into marketing and maybe running with a few less sales reps that are maybe just a little bit better at that closing piece and that consultative piece. I'd rather pay a good sales rep more than supplement that with marketing than just throw 10 bodies out and say go nuts at this point. That's not
Yeah.
what I would do.
Yeah. Well, we always know, what is it? Zig Ziglar, nobody loves to be sold, but everyone likes to buy.
Yeah,
Nope, that was Gittimer.
yeah,
Sorry.
but that's a cliche for a reason. That is a true cliche.
Yeah. Well, they want to be empowered.
Yeah, and yeah, yeah, and they're gonna gravitate over time to the companies that meet them at their level, right? You don't have to. Here's another one for you. Macho Man Randy Savage once said, "You don't have to like it, but you will accept it." And I think the best companies are kind of doing that. They're playing the hand they're dealt, and the companies that really listen to the buyers are probably going to come out ahead.
Well, and even in some presentations I've done, we know that, more than half, I think over 60% of a B2B buyer can create their selection criteria just based on what they find online. So if your website, your social presence, your content isn't speaking to them, if it's all about you, um, you might not even make the short list of who they're going to reach out to when they're ready.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about that because I don't really understand that. That's kind of more the art of marketing. How do you craft those narratives and appeal to those people? I mean, obviously, I realize every industry is different, but are there some kind of guiding principles that you use when you're deciding how to craft those messages?
Yeah, well, the old school way was marketing was responsible for awareness. So it was a lot of advertising just for name recognition. And then salespeople took it from there. And now, we're part of awareness, we're a part of exploring people's options, knowing what's available. They'll visit a website and look at, do they have what I need? If they don't see it, they might say, oh, they don't have it. So when we're talking with clients about content and things to include on their site and even product images that you offer from your programs, because people want to see it and they want to know that you can handle things. There was others that we've talked to that while they're a locally owned company, they can still handle bigger accounts, but people don't know it because they just look like a simple locally owned, company with their website. So that's where we get involved in thinking about that buyer journey and all the different touch points today. If you think about where content is and where people intake information, certainly they're searching. Google's still 90+% of all search traffic. AI overviews have changed that, but your content, that's where a lot of the AI overviews and answers came from. We're digging into more commercially intensive type searches, so longer tail. So the people that are ready to buy, we're not ignoring that top level awareness stuff, but making sure those things work in tandem to build that awareness. To answer their questions, like how much does this cost? Prices starting at, because if someone has an expectation of this will cost $1,000 a month, but pricing starts at, 2,000, you don't want to waste your time with someone who's not qualified.
Yeah.
And they don't want to waste their time either.
Sure. Yeah, and that's an interesting trend that I'm seeing too. I think buyers are asking for more transparency from companies that they engage with. How do you see marketing sort of fitting into that? I mean, I know you touched on it with price, but um, I'm seeing a lot of content that's more shifted to the overall experience, right? And process charts. Here's how we do it. Here's what we do. Are you seeing that buyers are asking for a lot more kind of nuts and bolts of how the business, how the sausage gets made, so to speak, from the companies they're doing business with?
Yeah, actually, I had someone who asked me that the other day, right? Like, what is your process for building a website and how can we ensure collaboration with what we want? We don't want it to look like all your other sites. So we go through this detailed process that we've developed over the years. So sharing that information, because again, more than half of them aren't going to reach out or you won't make their short list if the content's not there. That's why we love talking to salespeople. What are those initial questions they're asking and things like that to make sure that's incorporated in the content. And we talked about how reputation matters when you're looking at the car dealership, shoot, restaurants. You know, we all look at reviews on stores for, clothing or things we're going to buy. So reputation management is important. And a lot of B2B companies don't necessarily put a lot of effort into their Google reviews. If they're a local, still, if they serve within a couple hundred miles, you're still a local business. And if you ask anyone, what's your best lead source? It's word of mouth, right? It's a referral. Well, still, if it's a referral, they're going to check you out online before they reach out. So make sure
Absolutely.
you're monitoring and actively building that reputation
Yeah.
because that speaks to transparency. If you've got other customers, user generated content is what us marketers call it, with testimonials, good reviews, they're featured on the site, they like and engage with your content. That sends a lot more confirmation to a potential buyer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And when I think about this, what we're really talking about here on a lot of cases is some pretty complex buyer behavioral issues, go to market strategies. This is pretty detailed, intricate work. So, what would your advice be to an organization that maybe has some limited resources that says, well, I can just hire somebody to do all this? I mean, I can tell you what my experience here is with that, and it is not good because I don't know how to manage marketing. I really don't. So, what would you say to people who think they can take this in house and do it? I know obviously well heeled companies with a lot of resources can, but a lot of companies don't have those kind of things. So, what would you say to them if they're debating between outsourcing their marketing or potentially bringing it in house?
I would say, marketing today has a lot of different specialties and requirements. My favorite marketing answer there is it depends. We certainly love it when people have at least a marketing person in-house because they're the advocate internally. But you think about, and it's funny, sometimes when we talk about marketing, people talk about their social media. And it's like, okay, well, that's that's a part of it, yes. However, when you think about where, when we look at website analytics and where visitors and activity actually comes from, it's not social media click-throughs. It's visits to the website, whether they're searching for what you offer or who you are. So I would get them to think about the specialties that are required. Yes, you can have a marketing manager or marketing director, but you've got to have, content creation. AI has made that faster and more efficient, but you still need a human to make sure it's on point, on brand, and accurate. You've got email marketing, setting up automations and workflows tied to your CRM. There's integrations. Marketing's getting a lot more technical. There's search engine optimization, which is tied to your website content structure, even hosting, site speed, mobile user experience, all that stuff. And then you throw in paid advertising, so Google Ads when we don't show up top organically. I mean, that's a whole other practice in and of itself. So you really need a team of experts and specialists in those different divisions. And they can take, that key marketing manager's goal, right? The marketing strategy, collaborate on that. And then they can do a lot of the execution and implementation because that data is accountable to the client.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. There's just I think you're right. I think the misconception of marketing is that it's just about social media awareness and, throwing up a Facebook post or a LinkedIn thing every
Yeah.
once in a while. And, the benefits to the sales department are very rarely are the deliverables are very rarely around the social media. Now, it's good to have social media presence, obviously, you spoke to it, but I just want people on this call to make sure that they're thinking holistically about what marketing can do for an organization, because I think that's missed a lot. I think marketing doesn't necessarily always do the best job of standing up for themselves when it comes to all the different areas they can really impact within an organization. So I think that's such a critical point to hit home when we're talking about all this stuff, is that you need to expand your horizons around what marketing actually is and what it can do for you. I think a lot of small businesses maybe don't understand that fully.
Right. Well, smaller businesses, I was even talking um, with my team yesterday. Websites, can be big and expensive projects because we want to like build this whole thing over months. And now, building a solid foundation, right, with those core pages and information, but you're continuing to add to it and optimize. So we're continuing to create and deploy sites faster especially when they don't have a good site, because we can measure and optimize as we go. The other thing is you can tell when someone's trying to do a lot of their marketing in-house, because you'll see social media posts that are like they're weeks in between a post, and then there's like three in a row and then nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
Same with
yeah.
like page updates and news. I was looking at someone's site, and their last blog update was 2021. I'm like, maybe take the dates off because the content's still relevant.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean that's a lot of what I've bought over the years from marketing, is that accountability piece. The fact that you guys will do that in a regimented fashion, that has value to me.
And that's the thing, I've been in the agency world for a long, long time. So I've seen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I worked for one company that was, traditionally project driven, worked to being that monthly model, and saw some of those hiccups in the reporting and accountability portion. Like the work was still being done, but clients didn't know. So
Yeah,
overly communicating, we're constantly looking at reporting, and, we've entertained building a portal for clients to view stuff. They don't have time for that, right? Like some might say they want it, but will they use it?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you get some ridiculous requests from time to time. I know I've made my fair share over the years. So, I think what are, I guess, the fun parts of a marketing sales relationship? Let me throw that out to you first, and then I'll maybe kind of answer it. What are some, maybe if you have like an anecdote or a success story around like a cool, fun project you've done for a client? And yeah, there's just, I think we've been talking a lot about blocking and tackling here, but what are some of the cool things you guys have been a part
Some of the cool things, I mean, we love it when we hear that clients like they land this big account or something that they're after. So, we do a lot of ongoing stuff to keep filling that pipeline. But the fun part, there's a couple where a company, they had a huge opportunity. And this goes back to an Earth Day. The company they were calling on, huge, and it's a uniform company, hundreds of employees. And they, this this company was a triple net bottom line, right? So, the environment, impact, all of that, sustainability is a huge core value. And so because of that, we had done an Earth Day blog. We talked a lot about how this uniform company repurposes water, how they environmentally friendly detergents, how they recycle garments that are no longer wearable, even down to the hangers and everything.
Mhm.
So that became a blog on their website. And then we also did emails to prospects and made sure these prospects were on the list how Earth Day is every day at this company. And it was just a few days before their meeting with them, with the key people, and so it was also on the client social, it also had the sales piece, and then they landed that account. So when we have that interaction with the salespeople and the company and we know what they're going after, we can do little campaigns or things like that to help them win the account.
Yeah, and I want to stress that brings up kind of an important thing I was thinking about is the longer a relationship with a marketing firm goes on, the more alignment there is and the less instruction you have to give them. You guys do a great job of learning your customers over time and bringing ideas to the table for them that they may not see for themselves. I mean, it almost becomes like you know their brand a little bit better maybe than even they do, and the suggestions you make are really helpful. Is that something your team is purposeful about?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Elizabeth, I mean, she even did a ride along with one of the uniform companies in Chicago. I got to the point where I could almost do a plant tour for
Yeah,
Gallagher. Now they've redone their plant and new
sure.
technology, so I've got some learning to do. But I mean, we enjoy that stuff and, getting to know how things work and getting into the nitty gritty. And like I said, having those conversations, sometimes if you're with an agency and it's not broken, people will just let it roll. It's not ideal, but it's fine. But when you think about, the money you're investing, while it's not, necessarily six figures or $500,000 for a piece of equipment, think about how much more you could get out of it, right? If you could land that next key account, if you could retain customers at a higher level. And the thing about us is, and I've even told my team this, like, I never want to hear you say, what do you want us to do for you now to a client? Because we lead a lot of that. Again, what do you need? Absolutely. Is there anything you're seeing we're not talking about? But we say, based on the data, we think we need to do this. We want their approval, but we always need to be thinking about what's next. And then, as I mentioned, marketing is so much more technological than it used to be.
Mhm.
So having that expertise and guidance and we're never okay with just good enough. We've spent a lot of time in team training and an ongoing basis every quarter, our paid ads person and certifications, technical SEO and those changes with AI, how we're using AI, how we're building AI agents for clients and automations. We're not the same agency we were a year ago. And if others are working with people who are, just good enough, I don't know, feels kind of like a waste of money if you ask me.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that companies wasted money on marketing efforts in vain. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but no, I mean, I think that's important, right? Is to really stress the continuously evolving nature of the relationship. It gets better over time. I would encourage, places that are evaluating marketing to think over the next 3 years. Don't think about a new website. Don't think about, your social media posts. I mean, that's all good stuff and it's all important, but just like a lot of decisions that you make for a business, you should kind of always have the outcome in mind in the short to medium term and the long term. So marketing can help get you where you want to go. You just have to give them the tools to do so and put the trust in them. And I probably have really seen less immediate results from marketing and more from playing the long game and just really dialing in our brand and our go-to-market strategy and some of the different things we're doing to generate that awareness. That stuff does sort of take a little bit of time, but it's the payoff's worth it. That's been my experience.
Well, and thinking from sales plans, right? And just overall company strategies, nothing changes overnight, but you look at that 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan, and we like to know where that company is headed and their big goals. And then how do we create marketing to support that? And it's really just thinking about, like, even though our agreements, we have key deliverables, like these activities that we are doing, it's all based on the outcome and the accountability. So outcomes based. And bringing it back to, a lot of your sales expertise, I was in a CEO roundtable meeting a few weeks ago, and a company was ready to hire their first salesperson. He doesn't have a sales process, still dabbling in CRM stuff. And the group was talking about, accountabilities for the salesperson, like activities. How many phone calls is he making a day? And, meetings and things like that. You had mentioned earlier, that's again an old way of thinking, but more about the outcomes. Like, what does that pipeline look like? What are the connections that they're making? How would you measure, and how do you measure for your sales teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think again, there's not one way to do it, right? So if I advocate for a certain system, it doesn't mean that some other one won't work. That's not really how sales goes. That's not really how marketing goes either, at least what limited I understand about it. But I think, when you're talking about structuring an organization, right, and deploying of sales reps, I am probably much more interested in getting in the pipeline, really, rather than any sort of activity-based metrics. So what I evaluate is proposed dollars, and marketing plays a huge role in bringing those people into the funnel. So let me explain how that works. I think the best sales reps in my career that I've been fortunate enough to witness have kind of maybe a list of 20 to 50, let's say, what I call move heaven and earth accounts, right? These are ones that you will commit significant time, financial resources, marketing dollars, anything. And you wouldn't care if your sales rep had a meeting with them every single day if that's what it took to land these accounts. We judge them based on the industry that they're in, so the vertical, the size of the opportunity from an annual revenue standpoint, the type of company they are from a corporate structure. Maybe working with publicly traded corporations isn't for your company, but you really like mom and pop. So there's a lot of criteria that you sort of self-select to fill that sort of account-based strategy. And then you commit some significant resources to them. And that's where you want the most dynamic people in your organization engaging with those people. So that would typically be your sales reps. They're the ones that are going to be able to deliver the value, to build trust, to cultivate those relationships over time. And, when we're talking about outcomes lasting years, most of these sales cycles are very long. So there's contracts involved, there's complexities, there's multiple decision makers within these organizations. So that's this is not a play for the short term. And marketing has to assist with those real key prospects. And then the other thing marketing does is bring in more sort of quote unquote low hanging fruit into the pipeline. So anything that's outside of those real key accounts, you really want your salespeople to just be able to close and onboard efficiently, right? And to do that, they need to be coming to sales in a fairly certain engaged as a serious buyer, right? So that's where maybe the mindset shift has changed. It's not so much about like picking up the phone and making 200 dials and just hoping you catch somebody at the right place, right time. It's about bringing those people into you when they're ready to engage seriously. And marketing plays a vital role in that. And then your salespeople can be more steering the ship towards a quick transition from prospect to customer. And that's sort of how the system works. And you can do that a lot more efficiently than you used to be able to with some of the digital tools that we have. And, I would argue with less salespeople, because if they're truly just focused on your absolute creme de la creme of prospects, and then essentially functioning as closers for anything that is for when they're engaging with people ready to buy, then they're really maximizing their efficiency as well.
Well, and I think, closers and the relationship builders, right? So when we're working with clients and their sales reps, like we can do automations and things personalized from reps. So they're spending their time, on the best outcomes, like you said, the cream of the crop, the heaven and earth accounts, while they're still being supported with that air cover with, lead nurturing content. It can be personalized, to the company. It can be automated based on their, whether it's a current provider or your competitor, or if you know a contract end date, you can set a lot of that stuff up to automate and support them so they can do what they do best. Because I'm pretty sure, just sending emails and things like that are not a salesperson's, that's not where they make their money either.
Yeah, and people are so much more respectful of their time now than they used to be. I think activity is kind of down across the board. And I think a lot of companies have shifted in their mentality around the number of engagements they're going to have. So I think the key becomes, when I got into sales, I had to get 12 first appointments no matter what, right? So what would I do? What I would do was find I'd get like 4 to 6 real ones, hopefully, and then supplement that with, frankly, a bunch of nonsense ones just to make my numbers look good. But it really wasn't about that extra 6. It was about making sure the really critical ones I was delivering on as a salesperson. So I think the new school of thought, and the buyers have dictated a lot of this by just not giving people as much of their time, is, okay, if we're not going to get as many meetings, like how do we make them count? And I think that's where the sales marketing partnership plays really nicely together, is marketing is hopefully bringing in people engaged and ready to have a serious sales conversation. And then then the impetus and the burden shifts to the salesperson to bring those accounts into the fold.
Yeah, let them bring it home. Awesome. Well, we've been talking for what, 45 minutes? Do you want to keep going?
I don't know. I
I
could,
think. Yeah,
unless you have anything else you really want to hit on.
me too. Yeah, we can save some stuff for the next time too.
Yeah, yeah, we'll
We
cut.
could go on for days.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think how do you feel about it? I think it went reasonably well.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we'll cut this part out. And, we have some things about legacy in the uniform industry, but I don't think we need to touch on that. We've covered enough. We don't need to call anyone out, any one industry.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe I would say, maybe for like a next topic, maybe we go like heavy into like linen and uniforms. Like let's just make it all about that.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it might be some of the same ground, but I think we could put a new spin on a lot of this and make it more industry specific. And I think we could drill down on some of this stuff to what really is important to that industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we can put that bow on it then. When we're, again, as a sales manager, right? And, working in a few different industries now and working to build sales teams, consult with other sales teams, what would you say to people who either, don't have a lot of marketing or they're skeptical of, looking for that marketing partner?
I think that a lot of people realize the need, but they're either intimidated or they've been burned by previous experiences. So what I would encourage everyone to do is to just the next time you're engaging or thinking critically about marketing, just do it with an open mind and try and leave that baggage behind. Listen to some of these fresh perspectives because there has been a paradigm shift. It's a lot more sophisticated than it used to be. You mentioned some of the tools earlier. It's easier than it used to be. So I would just encourage people to not let a lot of preconceived notions around marketing and how they've interacted with sales and what your previous experiences might have been. Leave that stuff behind and just take a fresh look at it. I think it's worth doing.
Well, and, relating to that, just like your car buying experience, right? The old days, buying your first car, walking on a lot and being swarmed.
Yeah.
To understanding now as humans, we're more empowered, consumers are more empowered. Again, whether it's B2B or B2C, it's still a person on the other end that you need to be mindful of, respectful of their time, give them the information they want. Withholding information to try and make a deal is never going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think from sales perspective, not adhering to some antiquated process that isn't buyer focused is a major no-no now. And buyers will see right through it and they will work with somebody that's going to meet them at their level.
You're building a relationship. Again, whether they work with you or not, you're still impacting your brand and your reputation as a person and as a company when you're talking to these prospects.
Companies, marketing, and salespeople all need to respect the buyer's journey and meet them at their level. I think that's the main takeaway.
Yes, awesome. Well, speaking of buyer's journey, we did put together a B2B buyer journey book that we have available on our website. I'll share the link. But it's a good way to think of those different levels. Like they might not even be aware they have a problem. How do you get their attention with those longer contract type related clients?
Yeah, well, I think it's about finding out what's important to them is a step that you can really do even when somebody's not ready to buy. So a lot of those bigger customers, the work you're really doing is not so much around that there's not really some grand step, but what it really is getting to know what's important to them. So when they're ready to buy, you're ready to backfill that with solutions and speak to the things that matter to the customer. And then the other part of that's going to build trust. That's going to, show somebody that you're exercising some empathy or you're asking the right questions, you're being curious, you're invested in outcomes. So that's really what
Mhm.
we're trying to do is align outcomes to what's important to them. I mean, that's in a sentence, that's what we're doing as salespeople. So that's, I think, what you can be doing in those times when somebody's maybe not ready to buy yet. And what you wanted to think ultimately, this is a bit too simplistic, but what I coach to a lot is, hey, let's be the salesperson, let's be the organization that when we're leaving, they say, well, maybe I can't buy now, but when I'm ready to buy, I'm going to call that person. I'm going to reach out to that company. That's the stuff that you can do. And marketing assists with that all the time too. So again, it's all kind of, there's a synergy there with all of this. But when somebody's not ready to buy yet, there are so many things you can do to strengthen that relationship and to make yourself get a seat at the table when they are ready to engage. And they'll respect you more for it, actually.
Absolutely. Well, that was a perfect way to wrap this up, Jeff. Thanks so much for the time, and
Yeah, it was
I'm
fun.
excited to keep talking.
Yeah, it was cool. Well, we'll just shut the camera off and keep going for another hour.